Welcome to another tutorial. This one is on the Ford Escort. We're going to be doing the timing belt procedure on it. I have my students go and do timing belts on these every semester, and they struggle with the tensioner setup, so I wanted to go over it. This is a 1.9 liter SEFI, but we're actually going to use a 2.0 liter right here that I have out of the vehicle to demonstrate how to do this procedure. So first we got to remove the timing belt cover and also the harmonic balancer cover. So for the harmonic balancer, we'll just get an impact gun and zap that bolt off. And once you get the bolt out, you should be able to just wiggle back and forth and it'll pop right off. Then you got to take the timing cover off so we can get to the belt. And just a couple bolts. There's two in the middle and there's a few on the outside that you're going to have to take off, and that timing belt covers one piece. And it'll just pop right off. Okay, now that everything's exposed, we can go and take a look at all our parts. The bottom pulley down here, this is your crank pulley right here. And this is your non-tension side of your belt, which is most important. It's got to get tight. This is the water pump, which should be replaced on every timing belt procedure, the tensioner, and the camshaft. And your tensioner needs to be replaced on every timing belt procedure as well. So if you look at where I got my pick, there's actually a notch into the case, and there's also a notch sticking up on that crankshaft pulley that need to line up to give you top dead center. On the camshaft, everybody thinks that there's a little dot right there that needs to line up with the dot on the head, but that's not true. Up above where my pick's at, there's actually an indicator mark. There's an arrow that needs to point straight up at that dot on the cylinder head. When those two line up, then it is at top dead center. If you line it up with the dot on the cam gear, you're going to run into problems, so make sure you get it right. So first thing we need to do is we need to get this tensioner back. So to get this tensioner back, we're going to use an 8mm Allen wrench on a socket, and we're going to turn that tensioner back and pit it with this piece of metal. So get your Allen wrench on there, and then we're just going to turn it counterclockwise, and as it rotates, we'll pin it with that piece of metal, just like that, and that takes all the tension off it. And that's really the only difference between this engine and the 1.9 liter that my students do, is that tensioner assembly. So once you get it pinned back, you need to just go ahead and slide the belt off gently. You can also pull the crankshaft pulley off with it to make it a little bit easier. I didn't in this video, but just work it back and forth on the camshaft and on that tensioner, and it'll eventually pop off. Try not to use screwdrivers or any type of devices like that, because you'll ruin the belt. So there it is, popped off. So on the 1.9 liter, which is in the car, the tensioner setup's different. The tensioner does not pivot like that. It has a slotted hole that has a spring behind it. So what you do is you get a pry bar on that tensioner and push it back, and then retighten the bolt, and that pins the tensioner back. And then when you're ready to go, you just loosen that bolt up again. So here's the belt. I'm going to slip it on the crank first, and then you go up to the camshaft. I do that on every belt. You want to set that non-tension side really tight to make sure that you're not going to wind up off a tooth. So I slip it over the crankshaft and the camshaft, and then I just turn the cam with my hand to get it really tight. And if you can't do that, just get a wrench on it. Then I slip it over the tensioner and the water pump next. The water pump can be moved very easily, so just kind of fit that on there right. And I'm going to pull the tensioner back a little bit, pull the pin, and that tensions the belt. Now I'm going to put the crankshaft bolt in so that I can turn the crankshaft. Anytime I do a timing belt, I like to at least turn it 2 revolutions to make sure that everything's going to line back up. This system's very, very easy because you don't have to tighten a bolt to hold the tensioner in place. You just pin it, let it loose, and it tightens the belt for you. So it's much easier than like the Honda. So now I'm going to rotate the crankshaft 2 revolutions until both the cam and the crank line up. Remember that the camshaft rotates at half the speed of the crankshaft. I like to hold my hand on the top of the engine, and that way it puts a little bit of tension on the camshaft for when I turn the crank. You see the belt's tension there. Now I'll just put the covers back on, we'll put the harmonic balancer on, and we'll zap the bolt in. And it'll be pretty much ready to get back to the customer if it was inside the vehicle. Like I said, this engine's pretty much the same as the 1.9, except for the 1.9's tensioner needs to be pried back with a pry bar and the bolt tightened to pin it back so that you can take the belt on and off. The cam and the crank, though, they line up the exact same way. And people end up having problems with it because when they take the belt off, sometimes the camshaft will move. You should set it to top dead center before you remove it. You can see there's a gap right there in that tooth. That lines up with the crankshaft position sensor, and it's a reference mark so that the computer knows where the crankshaft is at and how fast it's spinning. For more videos, visit us at bccautomotive.org.